Hey everybody, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the process of practicum because this is inevitably a confusing thing for just about everybody in the program, and my intention is to make a video explaining it because we end up answering questions via email or repeating the same thing over and over again. So hopefully this will help you kind of understand the process because it's not exactly clear to everybody when they're getting into this. So Practicum and internship are the two classes at the end of your program that you're going to take while you're actually with clients. It's your fieldwork experience. Probably at the very beginning of your program, somewhere you filled out a plan of study with your advisor and you had said, I'm going to take these classes at this semester, whatever, and then eventually you get down to the fieldwork portion, the pre-practicum, the practicum, and the internship. So first of all, I'm going to talk about what those three are and what they mean and how they work and all that stuff. And then I'll talk about what's the process of getting into a site and some tips about how you can find sites that work and that kind of stuff. Because this is probably going to be kind of a long video, but it's going to hopefully have as much information as possible that I can give you so we can walk through the entire process. So first, the pre-practicum. Most of the classes that we have in our program, you can take them out of order, and there's some that you have to take before others, some that you have to have done before you go into fieldwork. Like, it's really important that you have diagnosis and assessment before you go into your practicum, or at least simultaneously, because if you don't have any training in diagnosis and you're sitting with the client, your supervisor says, okay, what do you think their condition is? And you're like, I don't know. That's not an ideal situation, right? So some classes can be taken out of order, some can't, but the fieldwork placement classes, pre-practicum, practicum, and internship, those three have to be taken in order. They can't happen otherwise. The pre-practicum is like, let's get you prepared to get out into the field. Let's start talking to you about your options. Let's make sure we can take all this information that we've learned in the program and kind of say, okay, how do we understand this all together and get ourselves mentally and organizationally ready to get out there and start doing the work. Practicum and internship are more or less the same thing. They're both fieldwork experiences. You can do them at the same site or different sites. There's all kinds of individual circumstances, which we'll probably have to talk about separately with your advisor or practicum faculty or whatever it is. Or me as the clinical coordinator is my official title. I can talk to you about that and talk to you about which sites work and which ones don't and all that kind of stuff. But the internship and the practicum are essentially the same thing, except there's less requirement, less responsibility, and fewer hours with the internship. Dr. Dell says this very well. He says it's like internship light, or internship on training wheels is another way to say it. There are some people who are like, I've learned a whole bunch of stuff, but I'm really feeling kind of anxious about getting out there, and I'd like to shadow a little bit more. I'd like to observe some other sessions, or I don't want to be thrown right into a group. I don't feel like I know what I'm doing yet. And so practicum is a good opportunity to do that a little bit slower pace. And then by internship, we will assume that you are kind of ready to take on some more clients, take on a little bit more responsibility, and jump into the role of counselor more fully. So that's kind of the difference. The practicum is a 100-hour practicum. So over the course of that one semester, you'll want to get 100 hours. And the only other, there's a couple other requirements. This is what you can tell your supervisors as you're going out there and interviewing people or asking questions about, well, could you do this? And they say, well, what do I need to do? You can explain these couple things. I have to get 100 hours over the course of the semester. That includes supervision time, it includes client time, it includes class time, it includes the half hour I spend drafting emails to my supervisor, it includes if I'm doing any research on clients, it includes just being on staff and doing observations, all that kind of stuff. It's the whole thing. It's equivalent to about a 10-hour-a-week job. So as you're thinking about your life and your course load and your other working life and all that kind of stuff, you can think it's like a 10-hour-a-week thing. The other requirement that you need to have in order to pass the class is you need to have 40 hours of direct client exposure. That can mean a lot of things. It can mean if you're observing a group, it can mean if you're doing direct counseling with the client, it can mean as long as you're face-to-face and have direct contact with the client, that counts as that 40 hours. So 100 total, 40 of them direct client hours, and then 1 hour of supervision per week with your site supervisor. That can look a little bit different too. It could be like group staff supervision. It could be one-on-one with you and your supervisor. And depending on what you're hoping to get out of your practicum, there are lots of different arrangements that work out, but if you think, I would really like somebody to talk to me one-on-one about my counseling skill, and you go to a site and they say, well, we're going to do group staff supervision, which means we'll all talk together about cases and consult about cases, but I'm not going to really spend a whole lot of time with you individually. That might be a site that you want to avoid because it's going to lead to an experience where you're going to feel kind of like, is anybody actually going to pay attention to me? It's kind of important here. So you get to have some say in, is this going to be a good site based on what my needs are? And so that's a conversation that you'll probably want to either have with yourself or your supervisors or your faculty too, and say like, how would I find the best site? It's one of those considerations. So 100 hours total, 40 direct client supervision, 1 hour with your site supervisor, and then you are required at very minimum to have 1.5 hours per week with your faculty supervisor. And basically what that means is class time. If you show up to class, I hold my class for 2 hours. Some people hold theirs for 3. You have to have at least 1 hour, 1.5 hours per week minimum. So those are the 4 requirements for practicum, okay? It's basically the same thing with internship, only you'll increase the total hours from 100 to 600 and from 40 direct client hours to 240 over the course of either 1 semester or 2. You can split those up based on whether you want 6 credits or 12 credits all in 1 semester. The 6 credit option is more like a 20-hour week job, so part-time. So if you're splitting up your time between I work at this other place and then I go to my internship site and I can't possibly do 40 hours here and 40 hours there and then try and live a life with any kind of health, then you'll want to take the 6 credit option. There's a 300-hour requirement for that, and then you'll just split the direct hours right down the middle, which would be 170, if my math is correct. I don't think it is, actually. Somebody do the math. 240 divided by 2. What's the number? 120. There you go. That's embarrassing. Okay, moving on. So you can split up your internship between 1 semester or 2. 1 semester is like a 20-hour week job. 2 semesters is roughly like a 40-hour week job, only it's a little bit more if you do the math, but it's close to that. And I think that's pretty much it about expectations for practicum internship. Okay, let's talk about the process then of getting into those. Sometimes people are well, just about every time actually, most people get so busy with their coursework, and after you're done with taking these classes and you're stressed out, and all of us get tired. In fact, right before I was recording this, I was like, man, you look tired. I have a clear head, a happy heart, but my body is exhausted. And it just, to me, when I look at the camera, I'm like, oh gosh, you look exhausted. Because I am, because this semester when I'm recording this, we're going into fall. It's been an exhausting year. And that's where a lot of you are when you're like, okay, wait a minute, I have to think about next January or next August? My mind is in such a different place. So we've kind of set up a system so that we can help you think about that a little bit earlier so that you don't procrastinate, and so we can help guide you a little bit more in this process. So if you are planning on taking practicum or internship in the spring, we ask that you, step 1, that you apply to the program. If you apply to the program, or not to the program, for your internship site or your practicum site, all that means is that you go on to Vera, which I'll show you in a second, and you say, Hannah and Aaron and all my faculty and my advisor, whatever, I want to take this class. And that tells us that, okay, we can start the paperwork process then. We can help you understand what kind of things we need in order for you to find a successful site and have it all arranged so that next semester it's all set up and you're ready to go. You don't want to wait until the last minute. Some people do. You wait until the last minute and then you're like, oh, wait a minute. I didn't know there was a process and paperwork and I got to collect all these documents and all that kind of stuff. So that's why we started early. If you're going, I think I'm going to get these dates right, but I could be a little bit off. But if you're going into practicum or internship in the spring, you'll want to start your application or have your application in by October 15th. That gives you a couple months to collect all the documents, to find your site, to do all that stuff. If you're starting it in the fall, starting in August or September, you want to have your paperwork in by March 15th. So January, February, March, April, May. Yeah, March 15th. It's like in the middle of the prior semester. That's the idea. That is not like a hard and fast rule. It's not like if you don't apply by March 15th and here it is the 16th and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm late. doesn't mean you're kicked out of the program or you don't get a spot in practicum or whatever. We try to keep track of those people who are at the place in their program who are ready to move into that stage. That way we can kind of help remind you a little bit. It's technically your responsibility to know where you're at and all this stuff, but we want to help as much as we can. It's just kind of hard to know with everybody moving in different directions and at different paces who's actually going to do this. So we kind of have an idea of who's going in, but we really need your help to say, okay, I actually intend to take this class. That's what the application's for. So if you're a little bit late, it's okay. It's not, you don't need to kind of worry too much about, will I not have a spot in the class? Will I have a spot in the class, etc. There is a chance that if you put it off too long, it will fill up and there won't be enough room. According to our accrediting body, we can only have 6 people in each class. So that goes for practicum. We usually have 2 sections of practicum open, so 12 people can do it at a time. And same with internship, 6 people in one, 6 in the other. And that's just so that class sizes don't get too big and so we can actually give you the attention that you need. So it's a rule that's there for a good reason. So if you put it off too long, there's a chance you might not get in, but we really try and upfront expect how many roughly, and we plan accordingly. So if we know there's going to be way too many people that are ready to apply for this, we'll just have to get another person to teach another section of it or something like that, but we can't do that last minute. So hopefully that explanation makes a little bit of sense and why we're why we're doing it the way we're doing it. So the application process is the first part. Now let me just open up Tavera here and show you what that looks like. There's another video explaining more of the Tavera stuff in a little bit more detail. Once you log in, you're probably going to have something that looks a little bit like this. It's not going to have all this red coloring and stuff because I was just messing around with the themes. You can make it pretty if you want to, but who cares? When the people from Tavera trained me on how to do this, I was like, oh, that one's pretty. I like it. I'll do that one. So the colors and stuff will look different. But it's going to have all these boxes right up here. And the thing you want to do to start your application is go to the site placement box, click on that, and over here on the left there's this pre-application tasks. So you'll click on that one, and there's this task right here, and there's going to be like a start button or begin or something like that. You'll click on that. It's going to take you about like 5 minutes to say, I want to take it in this semester of this year, and sign the thing, and then you're done, essentially. That's all you got to do. By October 15th or March 15th, you want to apply to the program through Tavera, and then you're kind of good to work through the rest of the process. Okay, this is where it'd be good to take some notes if you're not already doing that. Pull out your piece of paper or whatever, take notes. The other thing that you see right behind your left, my right ear is student liability insurance. This thing right here. Okay, so I'm just going to pull this down and talk about that for a second. There's another video in the D2L resource site. If you don't know what that is, you should find out because a lot of this stuff is going to be there, or you're probably here watching this video from that already. There's a video explaining how do you shop for it, what is it for, where do I get it, where do I go, what should I expect for how much it costs, all that kind of stuff. There's details up there in that place to be talking about that. All you need to do is once you get your liability insurance, the insurance provider will send you a piece of paper and you upload that document to Tavera in that spot that you just saw. It's literally, once you do all that kind of background work, it's literally just upload a piece of paper right there. I'm not going to talk about why that's important and what it's for. It serves a really important function and it's good for you to have it. It's a cost, but hopefully it's not too much. It's averaging about like 40 bucks a year, something like that. So it's hopefully pretty nominal for you, but that needs to happen. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. That one's just like, you have to have it, otherwise you can't take either of those classes. In other words, you can't be with clients and not be insured. That's just, it's not good. We just can't do it. Okay, so you apply for the program. You then upload your liability insurance, and there's no timeline for when you have to upload that insurance. You can do that whenever you get it. So you can start working ahead a little bit, but in the Tavera program, you can't get to the next step until you upload that. So that's going to be an important thing to know. So liability insurance is step 2. After step 2, that's when you're going to be wanting, if you haven't done it already, you're going to want to get out into the field and start making some connections and building your site and saying, who could supervise me? What's this going to look like? All that stuff. That takes a little bit of time. There's a lot more we could talk about exactly how to do that. I'll give you a few tips right now as far as what requirements are. It can be really helpful to have a good understanding of how many hours do I need, what does supervision look like, as far as how many hours a week, which is one, and have a little bit of understanding of our expectations. It's that stuff I just talked to you about. That way when you go out, you can, to your supervisors, potential supervisors, you can say, this is what I am looking for. This is the time I would probably need and the kind of experiences that I would probably have to get in order to get through the program. There's a ton of other questions. It tends to be way more complicated than I want to talk about right now, but there's lots of other considerations, and I'll tell you just a few of them right now too. Your supervisor doesn't have to be licensed as an LCPC. They have to have a mental health license of some kind, but they could be an LCSW, licensed social worker, licensed clinical social worker, that's what that stands for. They could be a psychiatrist with a medical license, which just about never happens, by the way. They could be a licensed psychologist, that's completely fine. They could be an LCP from a different state. There's different licenses that are essentially the equivalent of the Montana LCPC, and there's a bunch of them, which I don't need to go through, but as long as somebody holds a graduate level mental health license in a mental health field, they're probably going to be good. They'll probably work for this. They don't have to be on the site that you're working, so you could have a supervisor from your current job, but you're picking up a few hours at the local school or a local mental health center or something like that. So the person you're working directly with who has 15 years of experience but no license, they're not the person that's going to sign off on your documentation, but you might have a different supervisor somewhere else. You'll want to check with us to make sure that arrangement makes sense and it works for you. We need to have that flexibility in the program, but it's really more ideal to have somebody who you directly work with who has a license, but we can arrange different things if we need to. Lots of questions about distance counseling and distance supervision. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of context here. It's okay if you have a distance supervisor. Because of COVID, the rules around what does distance supervision look like are changing a little bit, but the general rule here is that you want to be close to your supervisor who is trained and credentialed to do that kind of work, and you want to be working directly with them. And you have to do it in some shape or form. You can do it via telehealth, but there are limits on how much phone time you can have, like phone supervision. And the reason is because we need to get to know you guys in person, and we need to get to know you to build that relationship so that we know how you are with clients. And if we're not getting that exposure, it's one thing to be a supervisor and just sign off on documents and take all that responsibility, and it's another thing to spend genuine time with you and actually get to know your skills and your abilities and the things you're working on and that kind of stuff. So the intention is to build an experience with a person who's qualified where you have really good connection with each other. And the more you do telehealth, the more you spend time on the phone, the more you, if you don't have that once a week exposure, you're just not getting the good experience. And that can be something that we hold you accountable to, but also your supervisors too. If they're not doing their end of the bargain, we don't want that to happen. And so that's when you can ask your faculty to help you have a conversation with them about I don't think I'm learning anything here, but that's another conversation later. Okay, so getting back to the process, you've done your application, you have uploaded your liability insurance, you're out looking for people and for sites, and you're telling them about the expectations of the program. The other thing that you need to ask them for is once you have somebody who says okay, this is going to work, you can be our intern here and do this kind of stuff, and you're going to say, okay, we need to get just a few pieces of documentation to make you legit in the eyes of the school anyway. One of them is you need a faculty's resume or their CV. If you don't know what a CV is, it stands for curriculum vitae, and it's just essentially a long form of a resume. You can get either of those two things, and you're going to upload those to Vera as well, which I'll pull this up in a second. That would be, there's this pre-application tasks, and then go into site details. Mine's going to look a little bit different here. Yeah, it looks a little bit goofy. Maybe it's here. Oh yeah, here we go. And there's a few places to upload. Where's the upload resume? That's where you'll put that one. There's three things basically that you'll want to get from your supervisor: a resume, a copy of their license to prove that they actually have the license that they say they do. And then there's also, they have to be trained in supervision. Now, this is one that people don't typically understand exactly what that means. Most people, what they do is they'll go online and they'll take a 3-hour class that they'll get continuing education credits. Excuse me. And at the end, they'll have a certification or a certificate of some kind that says, yep, I took the class, I'm trained, I'm good to be a supervisor. So there's those 3 documents that they'll just upload. Some of those things, and this is really an important piece, some of those things are required by our accrediting body, that we have them here, and they're, that shows their credential and that they meet qualifications. We also have parts of the process where we say lots of different licensing bodies around the country require certain things from their supervisors, like that they have these certain kinds of licenses. So we built the process here so that if no matter where you go in the country, you're probably going to be set up to have to be most likely to be able to get trained there without too much hassle. Now, this is a huge issue in the field. If you go to another state and they say we require 4,000 hours, not 3,000 hours, and you say I've been working for 10 years in the field, down the line, and they say, well, you need 4,000 hours of supervised experience, then you have to go back and do essentially internship time under supervision. So we try and build our program so that it meets requirements in other states so you have less headache in the future. So I'm not going to sort out which pieces of this are required by accrediting and which are required by licensing and that kind of stuff, but hopefully you can trust, at least for this at the beginning stage, that we're setting you up for future success, and it's the way it is intentionally. So these things are important. The other thing too is, and this little box takes about 5 minutes to fill out, but it's just making sure you have the right dates in, and that's just so Tavera can work properly, and that when you go to roll over to your internship, that it makes sense for how the program is structured and stuff. That's really fast. This stuff, these 3 things take a little bit of time. Okay, so I'm going to repeat this just so you can check your notes. I'm going to do this a lot just because it can be a lot of information. You apply for the program, you upload your liability insurance, you confirm your placement dates, then you ask for those 3 documents from your supervisor: resume, license, and proof of supervisory training. Once you have all those things, the next step is the biggest and most important step of the whole process, and that's filling out the contract. The contract, now that I'm keep opening this thing up and then shutting it down again, I don't see on mine where it says to fill out the contract, but there is going to be a thing, or there's going to be a place where it's going to give you an option for that. So I can't show you that right now actually. But the contract is just a form on here. It's kind of the same for both the internship and practicum, more or less. And you just fill out, you'll see where there's places to say 100 or 600, which means, is it a 100-hour practicum or is it a 600-hour internship? We use the same form for both. So you just say which stage you're at, basically. And then there's a place at the bottom where you can write in your supervisor's expectations and write in yours and the school's expectations too. And basically what we're trying to do here is we want to say, okay, my site wants me to be on site for 20 hours a week and they want me to do these kind of tasks. And the school says we have to get that 1-hour supervision, we have to get this many hours per semester, and these are the kind of experiences we want. We have a bunch of template language in there, and you can totally use that language and it's perfectly fine. But if you need to tweak it at all, that's the place to do it. If you need to say, my supervisor wants this of me, and it's not written in the template that you have, but I'm going to put it in there because I want to be kind of official with all this. And if they have that expectation and you don't meet it, and you guys sign on that thing, that means that you're kind of on the hook for, well, you didn't really finish the practicum, right? Also, if you say, I ask that my supervisor gives me 1 hour a week of supervision, and you put it in the contract, and they don't fulfill that, then they're kind of on the hook. So this is a really good way to help have a conversation. We can call it a legally binding document, because it kind of is. But more importantly, it's a way to have a conversation with your supervisor about, okay, you want me to show up this much, you want me to participate in these groups, you want me to have my own clients. But let's say you get into your site and all of a sudden they're like, oh, you can handle 20 clients in your practicum, right? And you're like, hell no, I can't do that, right? This is up front, we can have this conversation with each other about what's going to work and what doesn't, and how much support am I going to really need here, and how much can I just jump in and start going and feel confident and all that kind of stuff. So it's not meant to only be a legally binding document, which it is, but it's also a way for us to shape, well, how do we really know what we want to get out of this? You can use the template language, you can customize it as much as you want, but that's kind of the last step. Once you have your contract signed, oh, by the way, when you're done with all that, then it'll ask your clinical supervisor to sign it. What happens is you'll click the box that you're ready to go. It'll say input your supervisor's signature, supervisor's email address. Then it'll automatically go to your supervisor for signature, and then Tavera will automatically send it to me as the clinical coordinator to sign off on everything that it's legit and you're ready to go. It used to be that you had to send a piece of paper, sometimes via email, sometimes walk it over there, then they sign it, then you scan it, then you send it to us, and huge mess. Now we can just click it and it'll go and it comes back to me and all that stuff. Okay, you've applied, you've uploaded liability insurance, you've got your 3 supervisor documents, and you're done with the contract. Once you're done with all that stuff, you're ready to go. And now you can say, okay, send an email to Hannah or to Aaron, or actually both of us probably. Send it to Hannah, because she actually has the power to put you in the class. Send it to me so I actually know what's going on. But then basically we can get you registered through MSUB and get it on your transcript and on your plan of study and whatever, and you're officially done and ready to go. Okay, that probably sounds like a lot. It is just a bunch of tedious tasks, but they're really, really important, and we just need you to go through them. So a few final comments. This can be like an anxiety-provoking process for a lot of people, because they say, okay, yeah, I've applied, but I'm not officially in the class, and I don't want to get stuck or left out. I don't want to not get in the class or have my spot, because we're all kind of students competing for spots in this thing, and I don't want to get stuck because then I'm held back a while, and that's not good. The only comfort that I can probably give you is that if you're starting the application process and we know you're working through it, we're keeping a running list of who's in the classes and how many spaces we have. It would be very, very unlikely for you to not get a spot in the class if you're working through the process with us. If you don't apply for the program, we have no idea that you're doing this, and all of a sudden it's a couple weeks before the semester, then you might not get a spot. If you apply for the program, if you apply for the class, but then we don't hear from you, and all of a sudden you pop up and say, here's a whole slew of documents from my supervisor, and I've done all the work, but you're not communicating with us, then we might say, well, it filled up and we had no idea where you were. You kind of ghosted us, and so I'm sorry, But because we have a good idea of how many are in the class, and if you're working through us with the process, you don't need to worry too much about not having a place in the class. What we used to do, and we just can't do this anymore, but we used to say, we know how many people need the class, and so we'll just register for you, and then you give us all this documentation later. However, people weren't sending in the right documents, or didn't have all that we needed to be accountable to our accrediting bodies and all that stuff. So that's why we're kind of holding the carrot in front of you a little bit as some incentive to get all this stuff in. But we also don't want to make the process so anxiety-provoking that it just stresses you out any more than you need to be, because you're probably under a lot of stress anyway. So, with that said, as long as we're in touch, you hopefully can relieve a little bit of pressure on whether I'm in the class or not. And then we can kind of hold your feet to the fire as far as getting in all your documents and getting set up at a good spot that's going to work for you, work for us, work for your supervisors, all that kind of stuff too. So, rest easy a little bit if you can. Okay, that's a lot of information, but I think that is probably enough to get you set up and get you going. Work through the Tavera process. There's some other resources as far as how do I work through the process of getting to all these documents. There's another video for that can explain how you get in there and use that system. I think the last thing I'll tell you is that if you can't find answers there, you can ask us, but Tavera also has their own really good support people, and if you ask them about I can't find this certain thing or what to click on or whatever, you can always reach out to them and they'll help you through the process too, because oftentimes they have access that we don't, And so they'll help you get to places that we can't, because I can't look into your accounts and see where you're at. I can only see what's on my end, and sometimes that's not really enough to be really helpful. So it might be better for you to reach out to them in some cases, but when it comes to understanding the process or talking about your sites or, does this work for licensing or whatever, then we can talk about that a little bit more. I think that's pretty much it. Once you get into your class, some of the good questions to ask that I try to talk about in my classes, but things that students have had questions about in the past, you should talk to your faculty about what does licensing look like, the process of getting licensed. When can I take my licensing exam? There might even be another video. If I haven't made it already, I should make another one doing this. When can I take my licensing exam? What is candidate licensure versus independent full licensure? What if I'm in a different state? How do I go about this? The big one for the purposes of the class are what hours count in which categories and all that kind of stuff. The way the time logs are now, I don't want to show them to you because I'm actually going to be changing them a little bit anyway to hopefully make it a little bit more straightforward with maybe a little bit of explanation on what the hours are and when to use them and all that kind of stuff. But that's usually a question that people ask. What counts as direct hours? What are group hours? What's indirect client hours? All that kind of stuff. So I'm going to be kind of sorting through that, hopefully improving the process a little bit. But ask your in your classes about that so you know how to log hours appropriately. And I think that is pretty much it. There are a bunch of questions that we get from supervisors. Okay, that's not it. There's one more thing. Probably more things than that, actually. We usually get questions from supervisors about like, well, can I bill for a student being there? And there's all these sort of like insurance questions or stuff on their end about what our expectations are. The best thing to tell them is that, like, yeah, you can take notes on a video like this, and yeah, you can learn about our expectations, but if you're like, this is just a lot of information, there's a lot going on, I don't fully understand the whole process, which you shouldn't because it's messy and confusing, and it's my job to know this stuff, so you shouldn't be expected to know what takes me a full-time job to actually learn. So if you get stuck, if you get confused, if you just want your supervisor to check in with us, just send me an email, set up a time with us, or sometimes I might put you off on whoever's teaching the class, depending on what the question is. But there's always questions about what this means on their end, and they can reach out to me, email, phone calls. You guys should have my phone number. You should have my email address. You can always send them our way and say, if they are a little nervous about this situation or they don't understand what the practicum is, or they don't, it's all kinds of situations. Feel free to have them reach out to us in advance of the semester, and we can explain why we're doing the things we're doing, what we're asking from them, and answer any other questions. I find it to be really helpful when supervisors reach out to me in advance, especially if they're concerned about, like, we've had an intern in the past, it didn't go well, so we just want to make sure things are going to work this time. And that's okay. That's perfectly fine to send them our way, and we can have those conversations with them to, give them a sense of what we're trying to accomplish here. Supervision is a messy thing, and lots of different clinicians and counselors of all kinds of shapes and sizes, they do things different, and they understand what supervision looks like differently and have different ideas about what works and what's good and what's healthy and all that kind of stuff. And so this process is designed for us all to be on the same page about what our expectations are, and it's really, if there's more that they need, then please send them our way. We're going to put a lot of this on you to sort of communicate with them and let you sort of wear your big boy, big girl pants to set up your jobs and to set up your internships, do the communicating with them, all that kind of stuff. Because you're adults, and we're, by this stage in the process, yeah, we're the faculty, and yeah, we're teachers, and we, say lots of important, shiny, fancy-looking things, but we're almost colleagues, and very soon, after you're done with this process, you're going to be out in the field doing this yourself, and we're going to be asking you questions about how do you do your job, and what do you need to see from students that are coming out into the field, and you might be a supervisor someday. So we're putting a lot of this on you because most people can handle it. And but if you need that support, don't hesitate to reach out, because we're more than happy to help you through the process and do whatever we can to support you. So, okay, I think that's finally enough. I will stop now and talk to you again some other time. See ya.